Both are trio members of our youth circle. And I think it's a population that we've missed in the sense that there was nothing for them in trio. And about 2 years ago, we tried to get something together. We've had a number of young people come join us to start initiatives that, in all honesty, have not taken off. I mean, we did the easy things. We put a section of the website up where these young people are sharing their stories, and they're amazing stories of what they're doing post-transplant to help raise awareness, promote organ donation and transplantation, the success of transplantation. And so I encourage you to go out to our website. And if you haven't visited that, go look at it. A number of our former leaders have their stories out there and their pictures there. They've moved on to their own priorities in life, including those who were here in 2011, our Leadership Summit. Julie Bond, who was with us, youth representative there, she's now in medical school, back where she got her transplant. And her life is so busy that we haven't been able to get much time with her. Mary Wu over here, who's going to be talking in just a minute, has been with us for a while and saying, you know what, I'm aging out at the age of 30.
I am.
All right, she says, I'm no longer the youth. We had targeted from 18 to 30 as sort of a target piece there. And now she's 30, so she's growing up in that sense and saying she needs to move on. So we're looking for two things here. One, we're looking to understand what is different, and it doesn't have to necessarily be different, but what are the challenges that a young transplant patient faces that we may not think of as more age advanced. And secondly, our chapters many times are aging out. Right? We've got people getting older. Guess what? You get old enough and sick enough, you eventually will die. We're all going to do that. And so a number of chapters said the biggest challenge is membership with loss of longtime leaders through death. And a lot of people get incapacitated. They can't come out to meetings and stuff, and we lose track of them. Well, unless you're bringing in the young people, what's going to happen? Your trio chapter is going to die out. Trio is going to die out, and none of us want that to happen. So the challenge in this session is for Mary and Alli Weese. Where'd Alli go? Alli. There you go. Come on up here, Alli. Come on, Mary. Mary has been around for a while in this leadership team, and Alli recently reached out to us, and so she's joining the team. And so we put them both on this. And you'll see in that picture, of course, Ron Taubman, our chapter president from California, who through his other passion organization, UKRO, sponsored Mary as a rider on the float and brought her and her dad out to California for the lifetime experience of being on that float. And so that's what the picture there is about. And I'm going to turn it over to the two of them to share a little bit of their story, to tell you about the challenge they face, and then they're going to keep that reasonably short so that we can open up a discussion of what can we do, a dialogue between young and older, thinking in terms of your chapter, what can we do to offer support for young people in transplantation? Mary, Alli, it's yours.
Yeah, so I'm aging out. I turned 30 about a month ago.
Don't laugh. Poor old Mary.
Yeah, right. But today was a day of a lot of surprises because this is the first time I'm meeting Alli. We've just been in contact via texting and calling one another, so it's pretty exciting. Anyhow, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Mary Wu, and I'm a 2-time kidney transplant recipient. 30 years old, as you all know by now. It's been announced at least 5 times. I am a New Yorker. I am ABC, American-born Chinese. That's always how I introduce myself. And I'm just going to go into a little bit about my story and certain present moments, if you will. And then definitely, Alli, if you feel comfortable sharing.
Alli has not been prepared for this at all.
Yeah.
She didn't know she was doing that until just now.
We're winging this. We're winging this. Okay. So, I've always felt that my health is my arranged marriage. I had no choice. My parents had no choice. Just came into my life starting at 7 months old. That's a picture of me, 1984. Basically, my health issues started at 7 months old. And mind you, this was the 1980s. Transplantation is very different now than it was before. A lot more medical advances now, as we all know. My parents were not born in this country, so they were thrown into the whole American culture as well as the whole medical world transplantation culture as well. At 7 months old, it started with high fevers, being brought to the hospital all the time. Nobody could figure out what was going on. Eventually, by the time I was 3 years old, I went into end-stage renal disease, chronic kidney failure. They diagnosed me with renal agenesis, which means that my kidneys never fully developed. One kidney was shrinking, the other one was deformed, and my urinary tract was also defected.
Other than that, you're doing just fine.
Oh yeah, it's all good. The plumbing's been fixed up, so we're okay. Alright, so this portion of my life is probably more so my parents' story than my story. And as we all know, we all have a story to tell. We all have experiences that cannot be learned in a textbook because you experience it and you live it. And transplantation, my parents were tested to be a kidney donor for me, a living kidney donor. No one was a match. So at that point, it's like, okay, the reality is, in order for me to live, in order for me to have my childhood back, in order for me to be a daughter to my parents and hang out with my older sister, I need a transplant and someone has to die for me to live. At that point, I don't remember anything. I was 3 years old. Who knows what's going on at 3 years old? I was put in peritoneal dialysis right away at about 3 years old. I was on it for about 2 years. And then I received my first kidney transplant from a deceased donor on January 30th, 1987. I was 5 years old. Don't recall that time, but this is a picture of me a year after my first kidney transplant. And that is when life began. I remember going to school, being with people around my age, not the old, doctors and nurses, hanging out with my sister. It works. Transplantation works. And you think it's going to last forever, and you think all your problems are going to be solved, and that's that. But as we all know, in order to keep the kidney function going, you need to take those immunosuppressive medications, which does a doozy on you when you're developing, when you're growing up. Also, about 2 years after my first kidney transplant, my mother left. So it takes a toll on the entire family. I went through a lot of weight gain, weight loss, mood swings as a kid, you name it, I had it. Unfortunately, when I was 11 years old, I was rushed to the emergency room and told that I only had 10% function of my first kidney transplant left. And I was quickly going to renal failure, was prepped for hemodialysis right away. And that's a picture of me in 1995 waiting for my second kidney transplant because no one was a match in my family, second time around. And 3 years old, I don't remember anything, but 11 years old, yeah, I remember everything. And it's very hard at that time because it's puberty. It's not a fun time, as I'm sure we all can remember. And it's even more difficult when you're dealing with health circumstances and you just want to belong and you just see other people around your age and they're running around living their life, and I have to go to doctor appointments, I have to go on this renal diet, I have to prep for hemodialysis, and who knows what's going to happen if I'm going to make it. And it's really scary for me and my entire family, obviously. On May 5th, 1995, I received my second kidney transplant from a 4-year-old girl. I received both of her kidneys. I'm going on to my 18th anniversary from that second kidney transplant. To this day, it's very hard for me to imagine what her parents went through. I'm not a parent. I can't imagine making that decision, but they made that decision, and it was a freak accident what happened to her too. Obviously, they don't tell you a lot because of confidentiality, but a mirror fell on her, and it's because of that. And I went through that period after my second kidney transplant. I went through a kidney rejection. I went through that depression. I went through that bitterness. I went through that anger. Why me? Why is this happening? I just want to belong with people my age. This is supposed to happen to older people. It's not supposed to happen to me. But go through that, And 18 years later, realized, well, at least I realized, took a while, I had my, what I call, light bulb moments. So my past was all about my arranged marriage. Okay, I had no choice. But my light bulb moments is all about living for now. It's all about the present. It's all about what you do and the choices you make and how you try to make a difference and how good you try to do from the pain and from things that have happened in your past. And because of both of my organ donors who gave me back my life, who gave me back to my family and allowed me to live out this time with my family and my friends, to go to work, to enjoy every single day that's so precious and that so many people take for granted. So what are my light bulb moments? What are my aha moments? What do I do? Well, I do ongoing organ donation, transplant advocacy work through my writing. Writing has always been an outlet for me. It's always been a comfort. I finally, the day before I turned 30, I said, I'm finally going to do it. I'm going to finish my book, 500 pages. I finished my book, Confessions of a Kidney Transplant Recipient. I'm in the process of publishing it. I'm going to get into that later, but I finally said I'm doing it. And through my writing, through public speaking, through always just trying to, you can't force people to be an organ donor. Of course, when you experience it, you're biased. But, on that end, as a recipient, or when you're a candidate waiting for a transplant, you're biased. But you can certainly share your story. And so that's my goal in life, to share my story now. Because I spent my life, my teenage years, hiding and ashamed and afraid and just wanting to belong and not just fit in and forget everything that's happened. But it's had such a huge impact on my life. And so now I tell people there's over 114,000 individuals waiting for a life-saving organ. There's over 90,000 individuals waiting for a kidney transplant. And there's so much we can do. It's just about getting the word out. So I do that. As Jim mentioned, I was one of the float riders for the 2012 Rose Bowl Parade. Thank you, Juan and UKRO. And it was literally a ride of a lifetime. And not just literally a ride, but just to be on that float that represents organ donation and transplantation, to be in that community, same as this, with all of us together. It's an amazing feeling because we understand, because we've been through it. And it's just out of this world. It's extraordinary to represent organ donation, transplantation. And then the Transplant Games. That's held every 2 years. It's basically a multi-sport event, all kinds of sports for transplant recipients to compete in, living donors in their category, to show that organ donation and transplantation works as a major tribute to organ donor families, living donors, to our caregivers, to anyone even remotely involved with the transplant community. So these are my light bulb moments. This is all about living for now. But I want to hand it over to Alli, if you feel comfortable. Because I know we're waiting it. Do you feel comfortable? Because that's my story. I'll move over here. Okay, so if you want to go to the microphone.
My name's Alli, Weese. I'm 24 years old. I got my heart transplant almost 3 years ago when I was 21 years old. So my heart problems started, they think at birth. I was very young around that birth.
Excuse me.
Because you're like way taller than I am.
Don't be nervous, Alli.
It's all good.
They think at birth, I had symptoms of the heart problem when I was an infant. But I wasn't diagnosed until I was 15, and I got really sick one summer, like flu-like symptoms the entire summer, June until August, and I hadn't been going to the doctor all summer. Nobody could figure out what it was, and then all of a sudden somebody said, "Oh, your heart rate's 20 beats a minute. You have complete heart block of the electrical system. And, you need a pacemaker." So I got a pacemaker. They sent me to Stanford to see if there was anything else up. They did a biopsy, and they said, "Oh, you have some more heart problems." And I didn't know at this point I had any problems at all. I was like a healthy person, a normal 15-year-old. and they said, you have this really rare disease, rare for young person, rare to get it the way you got it, that sort of thing. It's called restrictive cardiomyopathy. My heart would contract, but it wouldn't relax. And you're going to need a heart transplant. And I didn't even, know I had anything wrong with me. And so my family just freaked out. And we didn't know what to do because we went from being healthy. My parents had 3 daughters that were normal. Like, the biggest thing in our family was one of my sisters had like a knee problem and needed laparoscopic surgery to now one of us needs a heart transplant. And we didn't know how to deal with it. So I think the whole family was kind of like, well, maybe not the whole family, like maybe me and my parents were kind of in a depression mode just because there was kind of a lack of information. And if you go on the internet for restrictive cardiomyopathy and just for transplant, there's not really like optimistic information. And then I went to Stanford Children's Hospital, which is Lucille Packard. They have a support group, but only for parents, not for children. And my parents went, a few times, and they were like, this is so sad hearing all these kids, or their parents' stories. My mom was like, I can't do it anymore. I can't face that. I don't know if that's going to happen to you. No more. So we were still like, we were going about it blindly. We didn't know what was going to happen. And we were really nervous. And then I'm like searching the internet for stuff and scared on my own. And there was just this lack of communication in my family. Like, we didn't want to talk about it. And so eventually I switched insurances, and so I didn't go to those. It's kind of hard because you're not all from California. I didn't go to those hospitals anymore. I went to a different type, and I got put with these amazing doctors that I loved, and they really explained it to me, and I liked it a lot. And they actually cleared me and said, you're pretty stable. I was like 20 at the time, and they're like, you actually don't need to see the transplant cardiologist right now. You could just see a regular cardiologist like every 6 months. So I was pretty happy, and I went off to college, and I had so much fun at college. I was a nursing student. I was doing really well. And then January, my junior year, it was 21, I just turned 21, and I started having these like pretty serious symptoms, like defib, that it felt awful. Like, I just felt like I was gonna die. I didn't know what was going on. And my legs would swell, and I couldn't get the water off. And by July, the doctors just said, I think it's time for transplant. Let's prepare you for that. And by October, I was listed, and they put me in the hospital to be listed on IV medication. And I got my transplant within a month, and it went very well. I wrote to my donor family. I got the heart of a 32-year-old male. He was 32 at the time. And I actually have a really good relationship with, my relationship's evolving. I met them back in May, and they live about 3 hours from me, and they want a close relationship. And so we're working that out. They're very nice people. And I've had my ups and downs. I've had, not that I didn't take my medication or anything, but I've had a number of rejections because I have a strong immune system, but so far so good. So
If you were each to answer the question, what is your current biggest challenge as being a transplanted youth? Or is there really no challenge because you just take your pills and you live life the best you can? What's your biggest challenge today?
My biggest challenge was it took me almost 3 years. My transplant, 3 years will be November 20th. It took me 3 years to really like get back in the world, to get back to what I was doing. Like I did some things that were like, wow, before, but I didn't have the mental capacity to get back to going to school, and I just started work like in September.
Okay, Mary?
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So they don't have to lower the microphone to get No, it's okay.
I just can't see your head.
Come on over. There we go.
Okay. My biggest challenge is long-term wise, there's still side effects from the immunosuppressant medications. Physically, that's my long-term challenge. I have arthritis. I need to prepare for hip replacement surgery. In the near future. I keep putting it off because I'm like, yeah, I'm rocking it. But but that's definitely my long-term. Definitely the current challenge. There's definitely a lot of emotional and mental ramifications. Like in many ways, I feel so. I still have that fear that something could happen because it's been 18 years, but I still, knock on wood, and I still have that fear like, oh, I'm going to have to need another transplant. Oh, I'm going to have to go on dialysis again. And then I think all these other things like time with my family or my job or my health insurance, like it kind of has a snowball effect. But I worry about being on the immunosuppressant medications all the time, like for so long, especially while I was developing, what's going to happen down the line. And then there's the doctor appointments and just juggling everything. It's definitely still a challenge for me because everyone says I'm a very difficult patient because I ask questions.
Let me interject. I'm going to interject a couple of things just by way of background understanding, then open it up to you to ask questions and see if there isn't ways you can think of. Supporting young people, okay? Let me take Mary as an example. I'm not sure where we first connected. We're certainly on the internet, and she's an author. And she has had the discipline of the last 2 years of creating 1 chapter a month. And I'm going to tell you something. It's been amazing reading. And so she publishes those chapters out on the internet, inviting her followers to edit, comment, critique, make suggestions for those chapters. And so I know Mary better than a lot of people I know because she is a gifted writer. And I'm not saying that because she's sitting there. I'm telling you, chapter after chapter, I was challenged to come up with words to describe how much each chapter got better than the one before it.
So listen to him. I paid him to say that.
And this is words coming from somebody, one who wrote my own book, who reviews transplant-related books as a hobby and publishes that all over the place. And so I've read and reviewed easily 150 books of every nature relative to transplant. I'm going to tell you, don't listen to this, Mary, it's probably one of the best I've ever read out of 150. And this is a young person writing the first book of her life. So I'm going to tell you, I will go back on our website, our TRIO website, and find where I have a link to her book. And I'm going to move it back up to under TRIO National News for you so that you can have the opportunity to see that. On top of that, we met at the Transplant Games before, and we didn't know each other. We were at the sharing session. They had the coffee house type thing. And I looked over and I said, that's got to be Mary. I walked over, she looked at me and said, Jim! Mary! Mary! So from my 6 foot, I reached out and hugged Mary. And we became good friends and kept in touch as the book has progressed every month. Then our chapter recently had the opportunity of inviting her over to come over from Manhattan over to New Jersey for
down in the Philadelphia area to visit and sit in on one of our chapter meetings. Now, lest you think that's an easy thing to do if you don't drive, it's coming from Westchester County at 5 o'clock in the morning into Manhattan to catch that dollar bus they have, the mega bus or whatever they have, down to Philadelphia to get there for a 10 o'clock meeting. And they were there by 9 o'clock, and her father agreed to come along with it. Now, I knew her father from her book, and I certainly had an impression that he's an amazing man. His wife left him early on in this medically challenged life, and he took on raising her, and the more I read, the more I was amazed at him. What do I know? You know, Chinese, speaks English, of course. Sure, bring him on over. So she would have somebody come over with her on this long trip. So we have him there at the chapter meeting. We have some of the background slides. She shares her story. And I think to myself, you know, he's here. Let me at least ask him if he'd like to say a word or two. He blew me away. I mean, the guy is a scientist. He's a professor in college. You know, he went on for about 20 minutes, blew us away. After the meeting, my wife and I got to visit with him and her for 3 hours before they caught the bus back. And I'm going to tell you, his question, Yushi, was, why aren't you doing more internationally? You're an international organization. I said, because we don't have anybody on our board who's got that interest beyond it. You want to join our board? I mean, he hasn't taken us up on it yet. But they were an amazing experience for our chapter. And my point is, one-on-one, reaching out to youth and engaging them. Now, Alli has reached out. We really haven't engaged her yet. We haven't reached out like Mary had a natural there. So I've got to know a lot of what she does, and it's on our website, a lot of her appearances, for example, in Manhattan, news conferences for DMV when they were advertising their, putting into effect the new law, et cetera, et cetera. And so there is opportunity here. And I've got to say, if you were sitting back thinking, who is this young kid up there? That presentation was pretty slick, wasn't it? Anyway, with that background, let me open up for questions of our guests. Go ahead.
Mary and I'll share with many people know that my son, Brent, at the age of 15, he was on the inaugural float for the Rose Parade in 2004.
Okay.
He was 15. He was one of 5 children out of, or what they call children, out of 22 riders. And we keep talking about it as a family. We had 15 members of our family go out to help and view, and it's one of the most, did you work on the float?
Yes.
It's one of the most life-impacting
It is.
activities, and I would encourage those of you who've never had the opportunity to consider it. We're trying as a family to gather us again so we can, everybody's all grown up and grandchildren and all around the country, but we're trying to pull ourselves together. It's an experience of a lifetime. I know the floats on either side of us. They were so excited to work with us, to learn the stories, to help us on our float. The judges gave us, they're very strict rules with the Rose Parade and how they do things. And they gave us more time than any of that particular, and that was it was in December of 2003. Think about going to the Rose Parade and being a part of the Donate Life experience and the float. And again, it reinvigorates what we're all about as far as part of the transplant community. It's just one other aspect. It's social, but it's very meaningful. And my son has many pictures. He was of the right age to have photos with the Queen. They all fawned on him. The Rose Bowl Queen. They were all teenagers themselves. They were like 16 and 17, and he was 15. He was in heaven.
Like the Rose Bowl Parade and the Transplant Games, those were both extremely life transforming for me, because I kept quiet about my health stuff ever since I was 12. And my parents too, they're like, especially when I started working, they're like, don't talk about your health, keep it personal and professional, have to be separate, you gotta focus on your health insurance and getting that under wraps. And I was making these were all the challenges, by the way. I wasn't joking when I said there was more. Yeah, but anyway, the Transplant Games like changed my life, that, oh, maybe I shouldn't hide anymore, because it's such a huge part of who I am, but it's such a fine balance, because I think all of us that have faced like these experiences, we can't be defined by our health at the same time. And it's always about, you know, sometimes you get so caught up because it's such a big part of who we are. I don't know if that makes sense.
And to add to that,
Yeah.
another way that we've been involved in her life,
Yeah.
Ron Taubman in California calls with another organization, UKRO. He says, Jim, do you know any young people, the kidney transplants, that we could use as spokesmen? And from our youth circle, we've had 2 very special people who, that organization, which has a lot more money than TRIO does, okay, have been very generous in their support of getting them on the float. And I know your son was on a panel with at St. Louis, right?
Yes.
And so it's important for us to keep youth in our focus and learn from them. And so from that is how she got out there, and her dad got to go with her for this life-changing experience. It's the connections, the networks that we all have.
Well, in the youth, it's just so different from, like, when I was growing up, there was no support groups for young transplant recipients. It's for parents, and especially when I was a teenager, and it's definitely a growing phenomenon. I mean, I don't mean to sound corny, but we kind of are the future, like, so, you know, and it's very different, like, I think the experiences that we've had, depending on the age that you went through it, whatever, if you want to say Alli.
So I go to TRIO with the San Francisco Bay chapter, but I also go to a heart transplant support group at my local hospital. And I think sometimes the adults there, they're like 65-ish. All of a sudden we had, since my transplant, we had an influx of, 17 to maybe 25-year-olds being transplanted, and which they haven't really had a lot being taken care of in the clinic, and they've gone to their support group, and the people, the men in the support group, they're not really, a lot of times when you have medical situations when you're younger, it's either you become extremely mature or it kind of stunts your maturity. So some of these kids are either way older or it's like they do have some kind of like ADD, ADHD, maybe Asperger's, or they're just a couple years behind their time. So they don't kind of always fit with adults.
Okay. Let's guide with some questions. I don't want to, yes, go ahead.
When you were at the games, I know there's a lot of youth at the games. Did you try to spread that
Oh,
word to
yeah.
those people to get out and try to advocate
Yeah,
organization? And
I think this piggybacks off of what Alli said, because in my observations, I can't say in my experience, but young transplant recipients, they either, after they get transplanted, they either like move on and just kind of focus on things that give them immediate gratification, or they are like advocate, 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 which is me, like the other spectrum. So definitely when we're at the Transplant Games, it's home for me because I'm with all these people that have had the experience of transplantation, and definitely around people my age. But it's really funny because that one moment we'll connect, it'll be great, and then we'll leave, and it's like, oh, okay, so what are you doing? What's going? Yeah, it's weird. It's a personal situation. Yes.
I think some of these transplant centers, especially the ones that deal
Yeah.
with the youth, they've got to get that word out. When,
They do.
we have children's here, and I really don't
Absolutely.
know what children's in Pittsburgh does about that, but they do quite a few transplants.
Absolutely. Well, oh, sorry. Were you gonna say?
Well, maybe there's something that you as TRIO can do where you have a center that focuses on children to go and ask and see how you can help in organizing something if it's not there, for example. I don't know. Ron? Yeah,
Yeah,
take your
we've
hand
been
up.
trying to do it. We've got
Real loud, Ron.
Okay, we've got 5 major transplant centers in Southern California, and they all do pediatric transplant. And our problem has been that we go over and we say we'd like to talk to the kids, we run up against them. Okay, they just won't let us. They won't let us talk to them. So the question is, how do you get past that barrier to get to the parents even to tell them that we have these?
I'm going to suggest to you
Yeah.
that a social worker would probably be very uncomfortable with some senior citizens coming in trying to talk to
I
their
know.
kids, right? What if a chapter came in and created some type of event for youth that isn't obviously to talk to them, but rather to help them in some way? I can't imagine off the top of my head what that would be, but create an event to celebrate life or something and offer that social worker, as though we worked already, an opportunity to do something for the kids that your TRIO chapter is going to organize, fund, etc., and go in and do it. Maybe that approach would open it up differently. I don't know.
Yeah.
You had a question, sir.
Comment
Yeah.
on the Transplant Games.
Yeah.
You find that in Pittsburgh, when we get new members, kids or adults, no one seems to know about the games. So we're like spreading the word on the games. I think that gets kids more involved.
There's an opportunity to go in. You're not threatening their relationship at all. You're bringing in something that's very germane to them. And by educating the social workers and in turn giving them flyers for the game, whatever, give them to tune in. Because let's face it, those kids come to those games and have a great time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
It's really fun.
yeah. Somebody else had a question? Alli, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes.
Jackie, go ahead.
I agree with you on that. Educating the social workers at the transplant centers is a really good idea about educating them to do what? You know, kind of almost have to have some kind of a, what would be helpful? And are you on Facebook?
Yes.
Oh.
That's my contact information. Like, it's so, I trust you won't stalk me.
You are a trustee.
Yeah, and that's my book link, and, well, I didn't get to, but my whole point was for the presentation, I call it my Wooism. My Wooism are my philosophical thoughts and everything. I get that from my dad. My dad wanted to be a philosopher too. So anyway, my whole theme of this was how we learn from the past, like I'm sure, especially when you're young going through this, the arranged marriage part, and then live for now, those light bulb moments, and it's all about creating your future. And that's why, you know, there's such a need to support the needs of the transplanted youth, and how are we going to do this together? It's because it's definitely a we. It can't just be a me or an I, and and not just, you know, young transplant recipients. Obviously, that's the focus here for my presentation, but just going forward for all kinds of chapters.
Ron?
Yeah, I just want to say, I believe in networking. Okay,
Yes.
we're here. I want you to know Mary's book is wonderful. Jim will back that up. She's looking for a publisher. So if anybody knows a publisher, let them know that there's a great book waiting to be published, okay?
Thanks. I paid him too, so
Yeah.
I've got a lot of money in the bank.
Just to give you a couple other ideas, over on the TRIO Philadelphia table, there's a book that we just published as a chapter. Right? We didn't have any money. We really don't have any money. And we came up with this idea of creating a book for children. Now, this is not transplant children, but it's children of a transplant family. So somebody in their family is receiving a transplant, how to help them understand what's going on, right? And so we had one of our members, who was a lung transplant recipient, mother of twins, 5-year-old twins, share her story. We dummied it down to simple phrases, and we brought the kids in for a Saturday pizza day. Susan brought all sorts of art materials, and we sat them down, and we projected the story, went through the whole story, and we went back one phrase at a time and said, who would like to illustrate this? And we had 5-year-olds, and we went up to, Elizabeth, how old is she?
24.
24-year-old who'd been, lived with a transplant patient, at least in the family, in Elizabeth's case. Most of them in their young teens. We had one heart recipient has got 2 sets of twin girls who are going to college sometime soon. You can imagine that. And they each, oh, I do faces good, I'll take that one. Oh, I do scenes, I'll do that one. The book is over here, all right? We went out, we went to the OPO and said, would you help us with this? Howard Nathan always says yes. He gave us $1,000. We went to the pregnancy registrar group that's in Philadelphia, and they said, well, it's not really us. Well, one of their workers is in our chapter, and she's had children after transplant, and her name's in there, so that was the excuse. They gave us $500. So for $1,500, we crafted by scanning in these images
And then we got professional on either side of it with activities that families could use with youth, resources on the web. And on the front end, here's what Trio Chapter is all about. Here's what Trio Philadelphia is about. Here's pictures of all the kids doing this work. And we put that in the book. If you'd like, take one of the books. There's probably about 20 there. We have sent them out to each chapter. One book went to every chapter. But if you want one of those, take it. We don't sell them. We give them away. We've gone through the first printing of 200, and we now are printing the second 200 with yet another grant. And we are now connecting with more and more transplant programs as social workers who find this a resource they can use with adult families who have children that need to understand. And so Cleveland Clinic just asked for 50. Well, when we give out 50, we say, you know, we don't sell these, but we sure you could use some help paying forward. And so they're going to make a donation. And UPMC wanted 20, and they sent us a nice donation to cover the cost of that. So it's paying itself forward. Another way that a chapter can support young people, even if they're not the ones receiving the transplant, take one of the books. I don't want to carry them back. Take one of them. If you're one of the first ones there, grab it. Yes?
I work in the Akron area. We have given a copy from the Akron Canton Trio to a family. Gentleman saw me in the clinic. He'd been diagnosed in December, saw me on March 12th, was seen at the clinic within a month, and was transplanted June 12th. His family has a small daughter and a teenage son. We also have given one to University Hospitals for their Akron Canton Center.
Yes?
I think it's so important because when my son was ill, he was 10 and had his transplant at 11, and I had a daughter that was 15 at the time and a son that was 19. And the impact on the family, especially my 15-year-old daughter just beginning high school, was incredibly hard.
Yeah.
And this many years later still comments, high school was hell, Mom, and she's 28 now. We had her in therapy with child psychologists and the whole 9 yards, but I think something like that would be so impactful.
This is really geared for the age of about 5 to maybe 10, but everybody else, adult, would enjoy this. Plus, it's online for free. You go to the TRIO website or the TRIO Philadelphia website. You'll get addresses of that in your program book tonight. You go there, there's a link to it. You can use it on your screen with a child. I've done that with a 6-year-old. She read the whole thing out loud to me from one cover to the other. Or you can print it out yourself in color, not a problem. Or if we have the books, we give them away. We do not sell them. That's our principle. We're not selling it all. And money will flow in to cover printing more as we go ahead. A different aspect of this, one of the things that we're doing right now is our project for this year, is we are developing a candidate information day. Okay? And we're getting medical professionals from our 43 transplant centers to come in and talk about various aspects of it. We have a full agenda. We have a book that goes with it. It comes from UNOTES, what every patient needs to know. And we're putting this together. Now, we are recording all those presentations and the whole event. We're going to put that together in a kit, which we're going to give to Trio National, who will in turn pass it on to every chapter. So you will have a kit that you could use just as it is to offer a candidate information day in your area. If you have medical professionals that can talk to those subjects, hey, you just skip over that part of the video and use the panel discussion with your own local medical professional. But the whole kit will be there, the agenda, how to advertise it, the flyers, and the videos to put the kit together for you. Now, give you again an insight. We're moving into yet another subject here, but I'll give it to you anyway. And that is, how many of your chapters are challenged financially? Anybody? No? Good, okay.
That's why they're here.
Ah, yeah. Those that aren't challenged financially are here, and those that are home. I couldn't afford to come. With this project I just described to you and 2 other dimensions of it, we got a grant for $5,000 to put it together. We said that was kind of cool. It's a good project. So we put in for another grant application somewhere else. We got another $5,000. We got $10,000 to develop the idea of this face-to-face one we're doing locally and more, and building this kit I just described to you, and taking those resources and put them up on a website that anybody can get to anytime they want. And so that's what that money's going together for. We're richer right now in our chapter than we've ever been in our entire existence because of the special project. That was last year's project, this is this year's project. Each year we're coming up with something creative, and you know, God works in strange ways. It comes through. And so challenge yourself with the idea of how can you take what we just heard shared, and you didn't have to take notes. This will be up on the website in about a week or two, so you can share this with your own chapter and challenge them. You know, do we know you young people here? I know one of the chapters, I can't remember where, they're a young person. Was it you, Alli? That was maintaining the website? No, it was somebody else. One of the chapters gave me a picture to use, and I used a national website, and I got chided by this person who's the webmaster for their chapter. You stole our picture. I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. Somebody from your chapter, I think the president sent it to me, so, you know. So there are ways you can use those young people to get engaged in things you need done. And you know what? Some of you seniors don't want to get involved in webmastering a website. The young people love to do that kind of stuff, right? And so find a way to reach out. Go ahead.
We wanted to say that
Go ahead.
we're trying to start. We've tried to start in the past, but we're trying to really
To the mic.
we're trying to really start or get it going. The youth circle online, the trio youth circle online. You might, I don't know, in the San Francisco group, we haven't necessarily had a lot of youth come or a lot of youth come at once. So in a way to support the youth, we're thinking is to get them in youth circle, and just that's a way to get them into trio and introduce them to each other and send them to your, their local trio groups, but also to support them just for you.
Stay tuned. When that becomes a reality, you'll see it on the website. You have a way of reaching out to some of the young people. Alli, finding joy, simple truth to a happy life. Okay? And for Mary, she's an author. We instead we got a framed thing that says, believe and succeed. Thank you both for your wonderful sharing. And we're going to be doing a lot together, I know. Liz is waiting to hear how this went, by the way. Liz, our mentor.
Can I share this? This is the Rose Bowl Parade 2012 anniversary yearbook thing, and this is just, I thought pass it around if you want to take a look. This is my book.